It's time to talk about Las Vegas with Ira. Each week, Ira David Sternberg talks with the celebrities, entertainers, writers, and personalities who make Las Vegas the most exciting city in the world. And now, here's Ira.
My guest is a very funny comedian, Greg Hahn, who is headlining in the Laugh Factory at the Tropicana Las Vegas, January 9th through the 15th. For ticket information, go to troplv.com. And for everything about Greg Hahn, go to greghahn.com, and you can follow him on Twitter and Facebook. Greg, welcome to the show.
Ira, thanks for having me on the big program.
Absolutely, and I already have come
Vegas,
up with...
baby, Vegas.
I've actually got some great taglines I want to throw by you and see if you like any of them to use for your future advertising.
All right, I like them. I like them already.
Okay, here's one.
Hit me. I like that one. Vegas, baby, hit me. 27, keep hitting me. All right. Yeah.
All right.
Take the $700. What is this? A free rum and coke? How do you guys stay in business? Hey, by the way, I was at the buffet. I asked a girl out at the buffet last time I was out there. She said no. I asked her if she wanted to go out. She said no. Too much on her plate right now. Come on, everybody. Come on. I promise not to do that joke. All right, let's start the interview.
All right, here we go. Some taglines that you could use for Greg Hahn's future advertising. Okay. Here we go. Greg Hahn, man of 1,000 twitches.
Fine, that's not bad.
All right, here's another one. Greg Hahn, kinetic conveyor of comedy.
Pretty good, good. I like it. I like all these things.
The last
You've done
one.
more writing than I have.
All right, here we go. Of course. And then here's the next one. Greg Hahn, the Gene Krupa of comedy.
Buddy Rich, baby.
Rich updated a little bit. Yes, you're right. And it's because of your drums, and that's why we'll get into that, of course. And then my last one, Greg Hahn, I should be locked up.
That's a good one.
Okay, excellent. Use any of them for free.
That's a serious one. That's a good
one. When did you get started in comedy? I mean, you must have been very young when you realized you were different and crazy, right?
I guess so, but I started comedy late. You know, I remember basically we had a comedian come to our college, and I know they paid him $10,000, and he bombed incredibly. And I thought, man, that's his job. And I remember he rolled off campus. I saw him in a car, had a real pretty girl with him, and he looked all happy, like just nothing was wrong. And I thought that guy just totally bombed and made a ton of money. You know, I could bomb like that for half the price.
Absolutely. Do you remember?
I just thought right away, early on, I thought, man, that looks like it beats working. But I was in the Marine Corps, and then I had a corporate job, and then I started comedy. So I got at it a little bit later, but still, it's okay. It worked out.
Well, just to show you I'm listening, I want to know how you know he got paid $10,000. The college
I asked
gig.
somebody.
Oh, okay. Did you ever meet that guy later on in your career?
I'm guessing, but I mean, that's how I must have found out.
Did you ever find out? Did you ever meet the guy afterwards once you got into
No,
the
I don't even. No, I never did meet that guy.
Okay.
Never ran into him.
So prior to the comedy, you were in the Marine Corps. You actually were, this is hard to believe, ladies and gentlemen, a captain in the Marine Corps.
Right. That was my rank before I got out. But I spent most of the time second lieutenant, then first lieutenant, then captain, and then out. Then they threw me out. I didn't get thrown. I got an honorable discharge. But yeah, it was great. I'll tell you, the Marine Corps, for an organization where everybody wears the same uniform, you know, the same thing, and you learn the same lingo and whatnot. It's I've never met so many unique madmen individuals. Very, very funny guys. Like I got a friend still today, Horrible Henry, I met in the Marines, who he likes to go shark fishing. He uses himself as the bait. I mean, these guys are, in the civilian world, you go, oh, that guy's a madman. In the Marines, you really do meet madmen, They're great, brave, lunatic, funny guys. So the Marines did help my comedy career. And, you got to get in front of people like a platoon and march them around like forward, march, left, right, all that stuff. And it's odd when you first learn how to call cadence, when you get in front of a bunch of guys like that and boss them around, tell them how to walk. Well, being a comedian's a little bit similar in that you get in front of an audience and you boss them all around with your stupid joke, So I think I don't know if I would have been a comedian had I not been in the Marine Corps.
Fascinating. Plus, it gave you some discipline.
That was a good speech.
Right?
Boy, that was a good speech. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say you learned discipline as well, right, in the Marine Corps?
I guess so. Yeah. Of course you do. Of course you do.
But I don't know if that helps you now.
Right. But the fun part is you learn how to be a lunatic, and then being a pro comedian, you you turn that into a career.
So at some point along the way, you decide to go from the military to comedy, which is not a segue that most people make, but you did. And what was your first gig like? Do you remember?
Well, my first open mic was a disaster. You know, in comedy, you just let the bombing begin. That's how you get started. You know, when you start out, you spit out a bunch of what you think is funny. And, you start out, you have like 2 to 3 minutes of material. And then let me tell you something. After 30 years, you have 27 minutes of material. It's worked out. No, you just keep showing up. You bomb, do well. And over time, you start, of course, you get better.
Yeah.
But I just kept showing up with my pants on. And in time, I know how to do it.
And there's a parallel with the Marine Corps because they also say, let the bombing begin.
Hey, good one.
Hey,
that's
all right.
Good. That's not bad.
And I don't even have a drum set here. Whoa.
That's right.
Were you always playing drums like as a kid, or did you learn that also after the Marine Corps?
No, I learned that as a kid, starting in 4th grade. Yeah. And you know what? And Buddy Rich was my favorite drummer. I'd come racing out when he was on the Tonight Show. My folks would wake me up. I'd come running down the hallway to see Buddy Rich play. And I think I kind of modeled my comedy a little bit after him. I like it fast, furious, and aggressive. And if they say, what kind of a comedian did you try to imitate or act like? Maybe a little bit of Rodney Dangerfield, but mostly I like to answer Buddy Rich.
I love it. In fact, I almost used Buddy Rich in my example for you on the tagline, but I went with Gene Krupa just as a historical reference to the world of big bands and music. And obviously I flopped because I should have said Buddy Rich.
You did not flop. Gene Krupa was great. Buddy Rich loved Gene Krupa. No, it was all great, all good stuff.
Excellent. Do you get a chance to practice when you're on the road? Because you're on the road a lot. You're very popular, not only in performing in clubs, but you do a lot of corporate gigs, which I want to talk to you about as well, because your humor, you would think, would be a little off the wall for corporate gigs, but it works very well. So do you, when you're on the road, do you practice drums or do you take drums with you? It's kind of hard to get into the Greyhound bus, isn't it?
No, what I do is when I go home, I practice about 5 minutes a week, but I listen on the road. You can listen to music. And unlike, comedians supposed to be original. You write all your own stuff. A drummer, since I'm not a professional drummer, I can pick and choose whatever I can do. In other words, you can imitate people. You can steal from them as a drummer, as a hobby drummer.
Right.
So it's fun. I watch guys that practice a lot. Put it that way.
You just have fun with it, in other words, right?
Yes. What I do is if I do run into an opportunity where I get to play in a band, is I'll take one song and I usually just use the song as a metronome to my solo. And I do everything in the world that you're not supposed to do as a drummer. And then I'm done. One song, I do all my solo, all my tricks, everything, and I'm done. If they say, I'll play another song, no, I refuse. Because I've done every single trick I know with the one tune. That's the key. One and out. Ruin one song and get out.
Did you ever, because you talked about bombing a lot initially, but once you got to the level that you're at now and as I say, I don't introduce a lot of my comedy guests with the words very funny, but in your case, I do, because I just find you hilarious. I've tried to analyze your comedy. It's impossible because...
Tell me what it is. I think when people watch it, they start off by saying, when's he going to stop doing this? And then about 4 minutes in, they think, I guess this is what we're doing. It is fun to watch people kind of like stymied or like befuddled and then in time start laughing. It's fun to watch people start to get it. It's fun when a couple shows up and say the man brings his wife and he's laughing his head off. I like seeing her scowl at him for laughing at me so much. And then in time, it's fun to win her over. I do enjoy that.
Did you ever? I just think that's hilarious. Did you?
Because they're like, "What are we looking at? What is even going on?" I've had that happen before in my act, where someone will just all of a sudden. One time I was performing, I remember in Orlando, and some guy just all of a sudden just yells, "What's going on, man?" Which I liked. I agreed with him. I didn't know either.
Okay, another tagline: you either get Greg Hahn or you don't.
But you do.
Yeah, I know, of course.
Add that to it. You either get Greg Hahn or you don't, but you do.
Did you ever encounter in the last 5-10 years, did you ever encounter one audience that you just couldn't get going and you looked at it, you go, wait, I know it's not me, it's got to be the audience. And maybe you find out later they're all on drugs or something.
I don't know. When you perform in front of people that don't speak English, that's a challenge.
Yeah, that would be good.
I've done that several times.
I would think though
you got to beyond slow it down. You got to.
I would think the physicality would get them though. They would understand that.
Right. Exactly. I do go heavy with that stuff if they don't speak English.
Yeah.
And whatnot. But that's the biggest challenge. If you go around Europe or here or there or wherever, I was in front of a bunch of Russian people before, and a Russian company in America or whatever, and they didn't get anything, but whatever.
Yeah, it happens. What are you going to do?
It happens. You just show up and what are you going to do? Quit? You show up. You think, how could I have made that show better? I torture myself and I think, what comic would have really rocked that audience? Who would have really done well there? A lot of times, maybe a crowd worker, because I'm not interested in what the audience has to say. Where are you from? Alaska. What do you do? I raise zebras. Okay. Anyway, I was in the gym or whatever I'm going to talk about, But maybe a crowd worker would have done better in this or that. But no, most shows go great. Las Vegas and that room, the Tropicana, I love the place. Love it. I'm genuinely having a good time up there. So I think that always helps.
Yeah, the Laugh Factory.
And there's a party in the green room. There's always a party in the green room that spills out to the stage.
Well, that's always good.
Yeah. My act is sort of like here's my act. This was the idea behind it, Ira, is like you're at a party, you've had 2-3 beers, and you like every single person you see. You're about as happy as you can be. And that's what I try to recreate for people.
Nice.
I'm not pushing the envelope. It's goofy. It's ridiculous.
I don't think you could, if you would send in someone to analyze you, Greg, I don't think they could, and which is why a lot of psychiatrists gave up as well. But I'm talking about the audience.
Right. Yeah, get there. Hey, the men's room is uncool. There's no urinals. There's a bunch of ladies yelling, get the hell out. And you keep going. Do you remember what did you just say?
Do you remember the first time?
Happy birthday, everybody. I know it's Valentine's Day. Thanks for coming out on New Year's Eve. Merry Christmas. Whatever. We're like, what? What's going on? What?
You do have to be somewhat lucid to pay attention to your act. In other words, you can't drink too much and enjoy Greg Hahn. You have, because otherwise you'll think you're going crazy. So you have to kind of be somewhat sober to do it. Do you remember the first time that you performed in Las Vegas? Do you remember where it was and when it was?
Yeah, at the Riviera, I believe.
Which is no longer with us, but you are.
Right, the Riviera. It's gone now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, over there in the Tropicana. But now it's all Tropicana. Well, I still go around, but Tropicana is my favorite, I must say.
Do you have any favorite Las Vegas stories of all the times you've appeared here?
Well, there's one time I was in the morning, I was taking a walk, and I saw this beautiful girl sitting at the bar all by herself. Early. She was drinking. I thought, holy smokes. It would be a little bit off the normal routine. Walk over there, order a beer in the morning, and sit down and say hello to her and talk to this strange, beautiful girl, right? So I walked to my room and took a nap instead. How's that for a story? That's why I don't tell stories on my show. There's anticlimactic.
Yes, evidently. You're the only guy not to have fun in Las Vegas. Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, she's probably a prostitute. I probably whatever. But anyway, it was beautiful.
Now,
you start, you start talking to yourself. So, hey, maybe she's just a beautiful girl from Iowa that showed up with her family. They're not awake yet. She just wants to gamble for fun, so she came down early. She's waiting for her nice family to wake up, and it'd be fun to meet her. Nah, she's a hooker, and you know it.
Well, you can always pay the price and still go back to your room.
No, right now.
When you look at the different kind of gigs that you have, you've got obviously performing in comedy clubs and touring, but you also have corporate gigs. So how do you get word of mouth going? It's not even you that does it. I'm sure others do, that you perform at corporate gigs, because I know you do a lot of them.
Well, I was on that Bob and Tom show out of Indianapolis in the Midwest, and they were on a million. They've got a lot of affiliates, and they mention it a lot. And then the most advertising I've done is, number one, the Bob and Tom show. Number two, I try to do a good job. I try to make sure that whoever hired me doesn't get fired, when I perform. I try to do well. That's the key to advertising. Do well.
Yeah, exactly. Fulfill your contract.
Yeah, they talk. People talk, and then you get a call from another guy.
Yeah, no, that
phone
works.
Keeps ringing.
Do they, at least in general, when you do a corporate gig, do they feed you as well?
They offer you dinner, but I don't like sitting down. I'm such a spastic before I perform or on stage. I don't like sitting down and holding still. Plus, you lose your great star quality. I like, coming out on stage like they haven't seen me before.
Sure, the distancing.
I usually turn down the formal meal.
And
that's why you'll see me after a big show in front of like 500 people by myself at Taco Bell, 30 minutes later. Hey, are you the guy that was performing tonight? That's me.
Or you went back to the hotel and in the lobby was that girl sitting at the bar and you say, well, wait a minute. Now, rumor has it you were raised in South Florida. Is that true?
Correct. That's correct. Boca Raton.
You seem to have, from my point of view, you seem to have an East Coast, not an East Coast accent, but an East Coast vibe. And yet you were raised in South Florida. So how did that work?
I don't know. I was born in outside of Pennsylvania. Where was I born? Bryn Mawr, I think. And then we, moved down to Florida when I was young. But I guess East Coast is correct. Yeah. East Coast, Midwest. That's where I've spent most of my life.
Well, you have the East Coast energy.
Is that it? Okay,
yeah,
good.
I think that's what it is.
I think you're right. I think you've done more analysis about me and my act than I ever have.
I have. I got a whole.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely, I have a whole printout here, the background and everything. Your time in jail, everything. It's all here.
Yeah, tell me about that.
You were also. You were also in a film.
Nobody's perfect.
No, that's true. You're right. No, you're right. You were also, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Were in a film.
Oh, what, that Louis film?
Yeah, there was another one that you were in. I'm trying to remember the.
I just did another one with Paul Rodriguez. I did another one. I don't know. I've done a couple. The
one that I was thinking of is called Tomorrow Night. You were in an independent film, Tomorrow Night at the Sundance Film Festival.
Right, correct. 1,000 years ago, and I remember I had to act opposite Steve Carell, and I remember calling my girlfriend at the time and saying, "This guy can't act. He can't even memorize his line." Really, I said that. I remember saying, "Acting's so easy. You memorize it, you spit it out. What's the big deal?" They fly this guy in from Chicago. He's like, I remember saying, "He's a big wig out of Second City. He can't even memorize his words."
So tell us about the new film gig. You were just mentioning about it.
Oh, whatever. Something I just did with Paul Rodriguez.
Right.
And we'll see if that comes out. I think it's coming out.
Did you have a speaking role or were you just an extra in the background?
I had a speaking role. I said something. Yeah, I said
just want to make sure.
I think I'm a prison guard and he's checking out of prison. It's going to be riveting. I can't wait.
You mentioned a former girlfriend, which leads me, of course, to conjecture it has to be tough to have a girlfriend or spouse when you're traveling all the time. How does that work for you? Or does it?
Well, I don't know. I'm a single guy, but it's worked fine because when you want to break up, you say, I just travel too much. But I'll sign up. I'm not against it.
Okay, fair enough. Do you find that you attract a certain type of female in the audience when you're performing? No.
No.
That was a quick no.
My line when I come off stage is, "Okay, now hear me out." It's not a chick act, Yeah, I think the guys that are real dark or dirty or drug guys, those attract the women. I've got like some type of a romper room performance. I don't think it lends itself towards the babes.
Well, I think the immature ones, yes.
Really?
Well, sure. Romper room. I mean, of course, that's a little below immature, but still.
A little too immature.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't work out. So, you mentioned Rodney Dangerfield as a potential role model, or as a possible role model, right?
Yeah, I've seen that video of myself when I first started, and I thought, what was I doing? Doing an impersonation of Rodney Dangerfield? Why was I talking? It sounds so close. It looked to me to be almost like an impression, but I just like the jokes moving quick. I guess when I watched comedy initially, maybe still today, I don't like to wait too long for the funny part, bring on the funny part.
Yeah, that's
so
it.
Now I've got an act with all punchlines and no setup. So no one knows what's going on, but they're laughing.
Well, that's because you're moving all around the stage. So they're laughing at it complements it in that sense.
Yeah.
How did you finally, moving away from Rodney Dangerfield and of course, Buddy Rich, how did you finally decide on the act that you do, which I suspect it's pretty close to your personality, your regular personality or offstage personality, and then you just exaggerate slightly for the benefit of the audience and for comedy. But how did you work that out to be what it is today?
Let's see. How did I work it out? I think trial and error. It's the style that I kind of imagined that I wanted. Ridiculous. I wanted to be ridiculous. I want people to forget about life is tough, Ira.
I
And I
read
want
that.
people to come in. They got big problems out there.
They
you know?
do. Absolutely.
And I want them to come in and forget about all that stuff. That's the goal. Not dig into it and remind them of it and make a joke out of it, which some guys are good at that. Mine is not talk about anything serious and just let people forget. I'm so ridiculous that they forget about all their troubles. That was the idea. And so, but it's not successful unless everyone's laughing the whole time. So just, showing up, going on stage 80 bazillion times and trying to make it funnier and funnier. And it's the funniest it's ever been. Everybody come on out.
And when you
I'm
mentioned
in my
earlier,
prime. I'm in my prime.
you're in your prime. In fact, you even order prime rib, but not before the act, after the act, so you can have something to eat.
I need to have you around to write some tags. Are you going to show up this week at the Trop? I'd like
Yes.
to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to come see you.
Come on into the green room. They got a big booze bar.
Wow, nice. Okay. I don't have to pay, do I? Oh, okay.
Come on in.
When you evolved away from Rodney and from Buddy Rich and you created your own style, I'm just trying to think, and I'm a semi-student of comedy. I don't think that there's anybody that's quite close to you. I see remnants of the old Steve Martin in a way, some of the silly stuff he did, but you're at a totally different level with that stuff. Does that make sense?
I guess because I haven't matured out of it. He's got more.
He's now the very serious statesman. Yes. No, you're still
great
Greg
writer
Hahn
and whatnot.
Do you think that you'll always stay Greg Hahn, or do you think you'll be Greg Hahn Part 2 and you become
I think I'll get even more Greg Hahn. I think I'll get even. I think it'll get more ridiculous. My goal is to always try to be funnier and more entertaining.
No, that's
what I'm looking. I don't want any lulls.
Age is not a barrier. So
no,
when you're 90, you're going to be the funniest.
It doesn't necessarily mean more moving around or this or that. I just want it to be whatever is funny. Want it to be funnier. Whatever jokes strike me, and I think it's better than it was 2 years ago. I'll watch stuff really from 2 years ago or something and be like, wow, why was I doing it like that? Or I'll watch an old TV appearance and just think, unwatchable. It's amazing that I've had the success that I've had. So yeah, I just like to get better and better and funnier for people.
That's good. So do you tape every time you perform? Do you tape it so you can review it and see?
I do. And that's what's so great about Las Vegas. You get to do 2 shows a night and you go back to your room, listen to it and, analyze it, critique it, take these words out, take those words out, just I try to get to the funny part.
Unless you're distracted going back to your room to review the tapes because there's a young lady at the bar.
Well, I might say hello.
Yes, of course. Now, I know you have a family. Do they understand you when you come to visit them or they visit you?
What do you mean I have a family? You mean I have a mom, brother,
yes,
stuff like that?
That's what I meant. I didn't mean to imply you were the parent of an unwanted kid. What I meant was you have brothers, sisters, parents, aunts, uncles, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I got that kind of stuff. No, they like it. They like it. I don't let them come to the show.
Really?
The show's so ridiculous. I let my parents come to see me at the Riviera, and I bombed unbelievable. So that was the end of family people watching me perform.
But they could watch you in terms of television or going on YouTube and seeing what you do, right? So you could get feedback from them that way.
Right, they do that. But you know how it is with your families. You're actually funnier than your stage act because I'll tell you here's a funny story. One time I was watching TV, my father was there, and I pop up on Comedy Central, and he clicks the clicker and he goes to the next channel. He turns to me and he says, "Well, you talk so damn fast," which I found very funny and a relief. I don't want to sit there watching me. That was the funniest thing that could have happened. I enjoyed that. Well, you talk so damn fast.
Well, they'll eventually figure that out. I guess maybe they won't. Do you have a book in you?
Oh, sure, but I don't think I'll write. I'll be surprised if I write a book. But of course,
I would think of tales.
I think everybody's got a big story. Like, what's your story? Interviewing people in Las Vegas. You've got a huge story. We don't know a thing about it.
Yes, I'd like to feature my guests rather than me.
Well, when I talk to you in the green room, let's find out about you.
All right, that's fair.
Yeah, but wait, you've been interviewing people since what, the 80s or so?
Before that, even, yeah. Long time. Interspersed with time in the gaming industry and writing and doing all kinds of stuff. Yeah, public relations.
Well, people out in the audience, everyone's got this big crazy story trials and tribulations. You know, we've all got a big thing. I think comedians get too much attention. I guess because we're up there, jumping all around and telling jokes.
Oh yeah, exactly.
You know what I like to think? Really, most people in the audience have a more important, in my mind anyway, they've got a much more important job than I do. And they say that public speaking makes people so nervous. If I don't do well, people look at each other and go, he was unwatchable. Want to get some ice cream? Doesn't matter. But the people in the audience, you got policemen, you got doctors, you got electricians. If they don't do their job, everybody's dead.
You're right. Whereas you could die on stage and they don't care.
No, they'd be like, we'd like a refund. Yeah.
Did you have a favorite comedian other than yourself that you enjoy?
Who now?
Yes, or in the past, either way. You mentioned Rodney, of course.
Well, when I first came out, everyone, I like Brian Regan when I first started. What happens is as you get 100 years old, is you start to get competitive. And at least in my case, you do become your own favorite comedian. Like I used to walk into a comedy club and you see the pictures on the wall of all the different comedians. And when I first started, I think, oh man, that comic is great. He's great. She's great. Man, I don't even belong here. These people are so good. Now you walk in, fast forward decades, you walk in, you go, hack. Is he still doing it? No way. Okay, these three guys are dead. This guy, no good. This club is lucky I showed up. I'm the best thing that's been here in 3 years.
Well, especially if some of those guys are dead, you do have an advantage.
Right. Yeah, but it's weird.
Before I let you go, last question. What do you see in the near future in the next 5-10 years? I know you said everybody has a book in them. Do you want to do more film work? You want to incorporate it with more stage work, or what do you see in the next 5-10 years?
It'd be fun to have a great big act and include the drums. Remember that guy Victor Borge?
Yes, Victor Borga.
Victor Borga. He was so clever with his piano.
Yes,
I would like to it'd be neat to figure out something like that with a drum set, but also play drums very well. And I don't know, some combination of doing my show and then doing some very funny thing, but playing drums like a lunatic and filming a special like that. That's a nice goal.
Yeah. And it's a great way to leave it
all around the country, but have it recorded and something that people could enjoy. That'd be fun. That'd be a good product to have.
I think so. Well, that's a great.
Bottom line is just to get funnier. When people show up and watch me, they're highly entertained. That's what I see. More of that. I'm lucky to be able to do it.
You are, and we're lucky to hear you, and that's a great way to leave it. My guest has been comedian Greg Hahn. He's headlining in the Laugh Factory at the Tropicana Las Vegas, January 9th through the 15th. For ticket information, go to troplv.com. And for everything about Greg Hahn, go to greghahn.com, and you can follow him on Twitter and Facebook. And Greg, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Ira. We'll see you over there at the Trop.
See you next time.
You've been listening to Talk About Las Vegas with Ira. Each week, Ira David Sternberg talks with the celebrities, entertainers, writers, and personalities who make Las Vegas the most exciting city in the world.
Anything you want us to be.